Imagine discovering miracles so powerful they were deliberately erased from history. Stories of divine intervention that could transform your faith, if only you knew about them. Why would anyone suppress these biblical wonders? And what does their disappearance mean for you today? 1. The lost miracles of Scripture. Most people think they know the Bible's greatest miracles: parting the Red Sea, raising Lazarus, feeding the 5,000. But what about the supernatural acts deemed too controversial to teach? Ancient texts describe prophets calling down fire from heaven, healing with a shadow, even stopping the sun in its tracks. These weren't fringe events. They were central to early faith. So why do not we hear about them now? Take the story of Elijah calling down fire on Mount Carmel. We hear that one often. But what about when Elisha made an iron axe head float? Or when Philip was teleported after baptizing the eunuch? These miracles weren't just spectacle. They revealed God's nature in ways that unsettled religious gatekeepers. Floating metal defied physics. Instant transportation shattered limitations. These acts weren't just about power. They were divine object lessons proving nothing is impossible with God. Yet today, we're handed a sanitized version of Scripture where miracles fit neatly into theological boxes. The raw, disruptive ones? They're glossed over or explained away as symbolic. But ask yourself, if these events were merely metaphors, why did ancient historians, including hostile ones, document them as factual occurrences? 2. The pattern of disappearing wonders. Every generation has miracles until they do not. Look closely, and you'll notice a disturbing trend. The most dramatic divine interventions fade from sermons over time. It's not coincidence. When miracles challenge religious authority or political power, they get quietly shelved. Ever wonder why your pastor never mentions the time an entire army was struck blind? Or when a prophet's bones resurrected the dead? There's a reason these stories make people uncomfortable. Consider the miracle of Joshua's long day. The sun stood still for about 24 hours, a cosmic event so dramatic that multiple ancient cultures recorded it independently. Chinese astronomers wrote of an inexplicably long day. Native American legends speak of a night that refused to fall. Yet modern scholars often dismiss it as myth. Why? Because it challenges our worldview. A God who alters celestial mechanics does not fit comfortably in our scientific age. But here's what's telling. The same institutions that downplay Joshua's miracle will preach about God's sovereignty over creation. The inconsistency reveals a deeper issue. We've been conditioned to accept only the miracles that do not threaten our sense of control. 3. The hope hidden in forgotten texts. Here's the breakthrough. These miracles weren't erased, they were preserved. Scrolls like the Book of Jasher and the Apocrypha contain jaw-dropping accounts of divine power. One describes Moses speaking God's name to split a mountain. Another tells of angels physically fighting alongside Israel's armies. These weren't myths to ancient believers. They were proof that heaven intervenes in impossible situations. And that same power is available today. The Book of Jasher, referenced twice in the Bible, describes Moses splitting a mountain by speaking God's name. Not with a staff. Not after a 40-day fast. Just words. This mirrors Jesus' teaching that faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains. Yet we're rarely taught that this literally happened before. Why? Because it sets a precedent too explosive for religious bureaucracies. If one man's faith could reshape geography, what stops yours from doing the same? These suppressed stories are not just history, they're blueprints. When you realize ordinary people operated in this level of authority, it reframes what's possible in your life. 4. The fear that silenced the supernatural. Religious leaders have always struggled with uncontrolled miracles. When a disciple heals without official permission, or a teenager prophesies better than the high priest, systems feel threatened. History shows institutions often prefer predictable rituals over unpredictable revival. But here's what they miss. God never limited his power to approved channels. The most transformative miracles usually happen outside the system. Look at Jesus' ministry. The religious elite did not crucify him for preaching love. They killed him because his miracles undermined their authority. When a blind man healed by Jesus stood before them, they could not deny the miracle, so they threatened his family. This pattern repeats throughout history. In the 1700s, John Wesley's open-air healings were condemned as fanaticism by church leaders. Why? Because when God moves outside approved channels, it exposes man-made power structures. The truth is, Institutional religion often fears genuine revival more than it fears apathy. 5. Your access to the forbidden power. This is where most get it wrong. These miracles weren't forbidden because they were dangerous. They were forbidden because they were democratizing. Ordinary people performed them, not just clergy. The Ethiopian eunuch did not need a rabbi's approval to receive supernatural guidance. The woman with the issue of blood did not wait for priestly permission to grab her miracle. And neither do you. The Bible's most subversive truth is that God's power is not hierarchical. In Numbers 11, 2 men prophesied in the camp without Moses' permission. Joshua wanted to stop them, but Moses replied, "I wish all God's people were prophets." This infuriated religious gatekeepers then, and still does today. Modern faith systems often imply you need a pastor's blessing to experience breakthrough. But the Ethiopian eunuch received divine guidance directly. The bleeding woman took her healing without an altar call. These stories were preserved to show you your access to God's power is not mediated by any human institution. 6. The modern-day miracle revival. Across the globe, something extraordinary is happening. In underground churches, war zones, and even secular spaces, reports of biblical-level miracles are surging. Blind eyes opening. Terminal diseases vanishing. Some doctors are documenting healings they cannot explain. This is not hype, it's a pattern. Whenever people start seeking God beyond religious boxes, the forbidden miracles tend to reappear. In Mozambique, Heidi Baker's ministry has documented over 100 medically verified cases of the blind seeing and the deaf hearing, including a boy whose eyes physically reformed in front of doctors. In Iran, underground house churches report regular miracles, like tumors vanishing during prayer. Even secular media has covered inexplicable healings at places like Lourdes, France, where medical panels have confirmed 70 cases science cannot explain since 1858. This is not about personalities or platforms. It's proof that when people dare to believe the forbidden parts of Scripture, the results mirror the book of Acts. 7. 3 keys to experiencing the impossible. Want to see breakthrough in your life? It starts with these shifts. First, stop waiting for institutional approval. Second, study the miracle accounts they skipped in Sunday school. Third, and this is critical, start expecting God to move outside your comfort zone. The disciples did not receive power until they stepped away from the temple system. Why would it be different now? The first key, abandoning institutional approval, is modeled by the Samaritan leper. 10 were healed, but only the one who broke protocol to thank Jesus received wholeness. The second key requires digging into texts like 2 Kings 13 verse 21, where a dead man revived after touching Elisha's bones. This was not a one-off. It demonstrated that God's power lingers beyond human lifespan. The third key? Study how Jesus responded when disciples failed to heal. He did not blame the sick person. He exposed their small expectations. Your breakthrough starts when you stop accepting man-made limits on God's power. 8. The miracle that scares institutions most. Of all suppressed supernatural events, one stands out, the glory cloud. Ancient records describe God's tangible presence filling spaces so powerfully that priests could not stand. No sermon could compete. No ritual was needed. Just raw divine encounter. No wonder some leaders feared it. But here's the game changer. That same presence is promised to every believer today. Not as a metaphor, as reality. The glory cloud terrified priests because it made their rituals obsolete. When Solomon's temple was dedicated, 2 Chronicles 5, the cloud was so thick that priests could not perform their duties. No sermons. No offerings. Just God's raw presence. Fast forward to Pentecost, the same cloud became fire on ordinary people's heads. This is why some leaders still resist emotional worship. It risks God showing up unscripted. But the cloud always signaled God taking over. Imagine if churches today welcomed that level of divine interruption. What might change? Everything from worship styles to altar calls to how we define order. 9. Why this matters more than ever. In an age of deepfakes and AI, people crave authentic supernatural encounters. The world does not need more polished religion. It needs undeniable power. The very miracles they tried to hide could be the key to reviving a generation's faith. Imagine if Christians today operated with the same authority as Elijah or Deborah. What would change? Everything. In a 2023 Pew study, 29% of young Christians said they believe more if they witnessed clear miracles. Yet many churches have replaced supernatural expectation with self-help theology. The early church grew explosively because they offered what no philosopher could, demonstrated power. When Paul's handkerchiefs healed the sick, Acts 19, it was not about him. It proved God's kingdom was real. Today's cultural moment demands that same authenticity. TikTok generations can spot performative religion instantly. They're not leaving faith. They're leaving faith that does not work. 10. The coming miracle renaissance. We're on the verge of something historic. As more people rediscover these truths, expect an explosion of supernatural activity. Not in cathedrals, but in homes, workplaces, and streets. The forbidden miracles are returning not as exceptions, but as the new normal. The question is, will you be part of it? This is not about conspiracy theories. It's about reclaiming your spiritual inheritance. Those miracles weren't erased. They were preserved for such a time as this. Start exploring the texts they warned you about. Pray bold, specific prayers. And watch what happens when you step into the full story of God's power. If this resonated, hit like and share it with someone who needs hope. Then tell me in the comments, which forbidden miracle shocked you most? Let's start a conversation that could change everything.